welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy podcast, where generally speaking, two mental health professionals talk about their mental health journeys and how they navigate mental health or work in the mental health field. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher. Solo episode this week. I promise I will have guests again. It is just taking a minute to line stuff up because I'm busy and it's coming off of a household of people being sick. So I'm just still not caught up on everything. This is an episode that'll also go up on YouTube because I have series suggests that I'm well organized and I'm not, but I have several videos and this will be fit into that series nicely of sad rich white dudes. I've done Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon because I am a pro wrestling nerd. I also did Harrison Butker because he's the worst. And we're going to add to that today. This person has always been on the agenda. I think I've publicly said a CM Punk video will happen at some point. Again, wrestling nerd. And Aaron Rodgers, because I am from Wisconsin and a Green Bay Packers fan. And there's very few people who I've been a fan of who have fallen further from grace than Aaron Rodgers. But today we're talking about the muskrat that is working to dismantle democracy very openly in America, but in other places too, because he's the worst. The richest man alive, Elon Musk, the immigrant who's taking your jobs. And why, right? Let me zoom out and explain why I'm talking about Elon Musk. I am not trying to slowly morph into a political channel. I promise. I would love to never talk about politics again if we had politics that weren't so damaging to everybody's mental health, mine included. I'm just realizing in real time, for those of you who are watching the video and I seem distracted, that I'm probably going to do an RFK video too. Ugh, I don't want to. What if we stopped putting sad rich white guys in charge of things? Then I don't have to talk about how they're ruining our mental health. Or in RFK's case, wanting to send us to wellness camps if we have ADHD. Fucking morons. Let's start there with Elon. No, he is a moron. Somebody with one of the most bloated opinions, public opinions of their intelligence, Elon Musk. I'm talking about Elon Musk because he is publicly stated he has Asperger's that seems to be self-diagnosed. And I'm going to say uninformed because Asperger's isn't a thing anymore. And so even if you're doing a self-diagnosis, which is valid sometimes, I have a weird space that I hold about neurodivergence and self-diagnosis. I hold space that it is very difficult to get in to see a specialist. And so I don't think you need to see an autism specialist to get diagnosed. I do think with the help of a mental health professional, at least helping you through the assessment process if we're doing self-diagnosis, I think that's meaningful. And you can be like, bullshit, Jer, you're biased because you're a therapist. I'm like, that's fine. I own that I'm a therapist and I'm biased that mental health professionals are helpful people when you're working on your mental health. I don't know. It's like saying your mechanic wants to like be the person who puts your brakes on so that they're sure it's done well. Like, yeah, I don't know. That's correct. And like self-diagnosed myself, right? Have I worked with other mental health professionals regarding my diagnosis, being on the autism spectrum? Yeah, I have. And I'm like super well qualified to do that. Not for myself, right? Self-diagnosis always comes with that caveat of like, we're not always the person who sees it most cleanly, but also that autistic trait where you take 9 self-assessments because even though you scored really high in the first one, that doesn't mean you're autistic enough to be autistic, right? So yeah, self-diagnosed Asperger's, but like again, Asperger's is not a thing. So whenever that self-diagnosis happened, it either happened a long time ago or it's just outdated information, which makes me skeptical of it. He sort of started trotting that out when his public opinion was starting to turn. So he's always kind of used the autism thing as an excuse. And for those of you who are like, well, he doesn't say his autism, he says his Asperger's. Asperger's has been a sort of it is under the autism umbrella. It's not a separate diagnosis in the DSM since the DSM-5 has been a thing. It's all part of the autism spectrum disorder. That's a much better way to do the diagnosis and talk about it. There are people who were diagnosed with Asperger's before the DSM-5 came out who just identify very strongly with that. And again, I'm going to hold some space for that. Like, who am I to say you can't identify that way? But just from a practitioner perspective, from somebody who's swimming in these waters on a daily basis, yeah, our current language is better, and talking about it as a spectrum disorder makes more sense, and is a more reliable way to discuss it than having separate diagnoses under that umbrella. So, yeah. And then we're going to talk about ketamine, because I'm also a certified trauma-informed entheogenic guide, although that's not something that I talk about a lot or do for business reasons as a licensed therapist. It is a thing that I happen to have studied and have some background on. And so, yeah, we're going to do a video on how Elon Musk is just an asshole and always has been, and he's a shit person, and it's not because of the ketamine use, although that might be making things significantly worse. And it's not because he's autistic or has Asperger's. He's just a shitty person for a lot of easily understandable reasons that have nothing to do with being neurodivergent or abusing ketamine. Although, again, if you're a shitty person and you're abusing drugs, you're probably going to get shittier. And talking about this in the way that normalizes that neurodivergent people can be shitty, and also is not that's not the reason they're shitty, and normalizing that, like, yeah, geniuses and very talented people, twice exceptional people, perhaps can be shitty people, and shitty people who use psychedelics are still shitty people after they do psychedelics. Psychedelics aren't a cure for being a shit person. So that's what we're all going to cover with Elon Musk. Let's start with this idea that he's a genius. I have yet to see any evidence of that. What I think we have evidence of is that he's incredibly wealthy and always has been. And when you have that level of wealth, it's very hard to fail at anything. Most of his professors, his teachers, don't remember him being an exceptional in any sort of way other than he seemed to be very driven. And I would not be surprised, sort of given Elon's traits, that he's not autistic. Like, I think very comfortably he's somewhere on the spectrum. I can't diagnose people who are not my clients. So just like clarifying that, like, it would not surprise me if a formal workup was done and he got formally assessed and he was indeed on the spectrum somewhere. I think that fits. He seems to have a lot of autistic traits. And again, a lot of people who have autistic traits, even the same ones as Elon, are not awful people. And so that's not the reason that he's shitty. That's not the reason he's a bad boss. That's not the reason he's an abusive partner. That's not the reason he's a deadbeat dad. He's just those things because he's a shitty person. It doesn't have to do with neurodivergence. Lots of great parents out there have autism. Lots of great bosses and entrepreneurs and people who are functional under this shitty cloud of capitalism are neurodivergent and on the autism spectrum. Lots of people who were exceptional students and misdiagnosed or diagnosed late came out to be deeply empathic and caring humans. The fact that he's shitty doesn't have to do with the fact that he's autistic. Almost assuredly has to do with the fact that he's rich. And like, yeah, so he grew up in apartheid South Africa. He seems to be a fan. He didn't like being in South Africa. He wanted to come to America. That seems to be established from a couple different biographers and friends and family who do interviews about him, is that he wanted to come to America, but like not because he thought apartheid was bad. He seems, again, to have been a fan. And Elon's interesting. So I think drug use and potentially brain damage explain sort of his turn towards the right wing. But also, like, it's pretty well established that people who amass wealth turn more conservative. Like, they want to pay fewer taxes, and they fall in love with the smell of their own farts because they think they earned all of this themselves. So they start to like get lost in their own Kool-Aid, drinking their own Kool-Aid, lost in their own sauce. I don't know. That might be like a masturbation joke that I'm not comfortable making right now. Um, there's a botched penis joke, penis job joke somewhere in there with Elon and his kids who are test tube babies. And that's not me being shitty towards IVF. That's me being shitty towards Christian nationalists who want to ban it. And then they love Elon, who's having test tube babies because supposedly, according to some of his exes, he has a botched penis implant. Just like, gosh. Again, like, I'd love to just be talking about like ADHD with another neurodivergent therapist instead of doing a deep dive into Elon Musk. Elon left South Africa to avoid mandatory military service, which, like, again, as like a leftist, anarchist, pretty far on the fucking left. I don't have an American counterpart that I feel comfortable identifying with. Political party, I mean. Yeah, that's good. Like, mandatory military service for an oppressive regime is a bad thing. So if Elon fled South Africa to not serve in the military because the military is an oppressive force, cool. Seems like he just fled to not have to serve, not because he was morally opposed, but because he didn't want to do that. And again, so he didn't want to do something that was bad. I'm not going to ding him for that. I'm going to like call out the Christian nationalists who are like pro-military and like want to wave the flag and be like, Elon's a draft dodger. Donald Trump is a draft dodger. These are shitty people. They don't have a sense of nationalism, as it were. They just don't want to pay their taxes. And America's a great place to come if you're wealthy and don't want to pay taxes. And in Donald Trump's case, be a pedophile. Long history in America of defending and protecting the pedophiles. So Elon goes to Canada, and again, like, it's just where like he has wealth here. Like, he's wealthy still. He tells the story of couch surfing and being poor, and like poor me living in squalor with my startup idea for like an online Yellow Pages. Like, nah, you got a $30,000 loan from your dad. Not even a loan, you just got $30,000. I haven't heard anything that it was a loan, although he certainly has money to pay it back. I'm not suggesting he doesn't. But like, again, it's the Bill Gates story. It's all these other stories of these like entrepreneur Silicon Valley startup peoples. Like, they had money. Like, he had that safety net to fail. His dad talks about having so much money that they like couldn't fit it all in their safe growing up. Like, the emerald mine story is real. His dad, in his shady way that we're not quite sure how, owns half an emerald mine. Like, Elon had horses and land and nice cars that he grew up with. He had shitty parents who got divorced, and he lived with his dad, and his dad seems to also be an awful person. And again, like, there's our best explanation for why is Elon such a shit person. Well, because he was raised by a shitty person, and like, that happens a lot, right? Like, when you're an abuse victim, you have some opportunities to not do that or to repeat the pattern. And he just repeats the pattern. So as much as he hates his dad, he's become very much like his father, which, you know, probably some of the self-loathing and might explain some of the drug use later. But yeah, like, he's just wealthy the whole time. And so this sort of idea that like he was a genius or he was like ahead of the curve or really great, like, nah, he wanted to start with like an online Yellow Pages. And then he wanted to have an online bank. Like, these were not original ideas. Again, he just had money to play with. And not that he had millions and billions to play with. He made more money off of these things than he started with. He did accumulate a great deal of his own wealth. But like, it's not like he's some sort of self-made man. He came from a shit ton of money. He was well educated. He had money to play with. He had safety nets to fail. This is not somebody who was at risk of being out on the street if his company didn't pan out. And he's just been shitty throughout. So like he tells the story of like being bullied, but the more that he told that story, the more his former classmates kind of spoke out and said like, well, he was a bully. He talked about getting pushed down the stairs and like having his head slammed into the ground by this kid who beat him up. And like it came out that Elon kept saying shit about his dad who had killed himself. So like this kid finally snapped. I'm like, right, that's what happens when you bully someone. So at some point they're going to retaliate. And then Elon wants to play the victim when he was the bully. And I'm not defending people shoving people downstairs or slamming their head against the ground. Again, like that's a story Elon has told a lot. And the person who was the victim, perpetrator, depending on how you want to view that story, both in real life, didn't deny that he pushed him down the stairs and didn't deny that they had a physical altercation then. So we seem to have at least one confirmed instance of like traumatic brain injury potential for Elon. Like, yeah, his brain just could be deteriorated at this point. Traumatic brain injury will do that. It is injuries that we're learning more about them. They can just continue to sort of deteriorate. Our brains deteriorate over time as we age anyway, and traumatic brain injuries sometimes can make that significantly worse. That's the NFL players who are dying at 55 or who are killing themselves, or the professional wrestlers who kill themselves and their families. Yeah, it's not good for our brain to be bounced aggressively off of our skulls. It's pretty bad for it, actually. So, yeah, that could be a complicating factor here. I'm not dismissing that fact. I think it's a thing people don't bring up enough because they're busy saying he's autistic, so it's fine that he's an asshole, or they're blaming the ketamine. And again, it's not fine. If you're autistic or you're on spectrum or you're neurodivergent, like if you're an asshole, you're just an asshole. Like it's not because of your neurodivergence. Your neurodivergence might turn the volume up or down on that, but it is not a cause of that. And so again, we just sort of have like Elon's weird growing up. He's bullied. He doesn't have a lot of friends. His dad's shitty to him. You know, like these rich white tech bros who are trying to overthrow democracy just should have gone to therapy. Again, I'm biased. I'm a therapist. But like, yeah, he's a grown man with daddy issues. That's why he gets along with Trump so well, because grown men with daddy issues. Like Trump's dad just made fun of him and told him what a fucking moron he was all the time, because he is a very stupid person. And I'm sort of the opinion that based on what we know about Elon, he's also an idiot. It just seems he was like wealthy enough to be around computers and technology before a lot of other people were. So like his dad flew him to this computer conference and Elon got to talk about with a bunch of smart people. He didn't start Tesla. He threw a bunch of money at Tesla and then was around a bunch of really smart people. The things that he's come up with seem to be dumb. He's fought to make sure Tesla has carbon fiber bodies for their cars, and that causes like this toxic paint and toxic waste. Like it's not a good thing. It specifically goes against the saving the world thing he's tried to tout for many years. If you're forcing your cars to be painted with toxic paint, that's bad for the environment. So yeah, like I think he's a moron. Then like SpaceX, he was just around a bunch of like really smart engineers, and so he hired them, not because he's really smart, because he has a lot of money, right? Like maybe he's good at finding talent, but again, it seems like as much as that might be something he's good at, he also drives them away regularly because he's a shitty boss to work for. He just seems to not sleep a lot and think that that's a good thing. That could be a neurodivergent trait. It could be his own mythologizing. A lot of people throughout his history have talked about like he doesn't sleep a lot. He thinks working 120 hours a week is good. Like he's a hard person to be around. People don't like being around him, so he throws himself into his work. So he doesn't have to deal with the fact that he has a shitty personality. And like I think that's it. I think if he had stayed sort of a recluse like Curtis Yarvin or Peter Thiel and people knew less about him, he still might have that mystique of being the real world Tony Stark. And like he's not. he just has a lot of money, in the same way that Tony Stark started way ahead because his dad had a lot of money. Like, privileged people are privileged, wealthy people are privileged. Um, and so then Elon's turn towards the right wing, I think, has more to do with like his value has always been deeply overstated. It's based on a lot of his Tesla stock, which he owns a lot of. It's always been overvalued. Like Tesla's, and I don't understand how the stock market works. It's made up. It's a fake thing. Money is a fake thing, right? It's just a made up thing we all go along with. So is the stock market. But like, from my understanding, a lot of his wealth is tied up in that, and Tesla is valued more than every other car maker combined in the United States. And that's like such an obvious overvalue. Obviously, I can say that now, seeing how easy it is for Elon to tank all that with his cult of personality. But like a car maker that makes fewer vehicles than any other automaker being valued at more than all the other ones combined sounds preposterous. Again, like the stock market is the new land prospecting that wealthy people use to get richer and keep poor people from tapping into that. That's why I'm not going to get into the stock market. It's a whole other thing. Money's made up and dumb. As a neurodivergent person, it's never made sense to me, and it irritates me greatly that we all pretend that it's an important thing. So yeah, it seems like his only like actual trait that's exceptional is how little he sleeps. And at like 55 or whatever he is, that might be catching up to him, because that could also be causing some brain deterioration in that he doesn't sleep very often. He just doesn't maintain long-term relationships. The person who was perhaps closest to him and kind of served as his like mother figure slash his mediator slash the person who calmed him down with his businesses was his personal assistant slash secretary, who worked with him for like a decade, and then he like fired her very unceremoniously after telling her that he could do his job, her job. He just like fired her. So, you know, he's just like a shitty boss. He doesn't get along with other people when he's the CEO. He's had a couple different like corporate takeovers that have gone very poorly because people don't like working for him. He just like doesn't seem to have a good social life, in spite of being incredibly wealthy. Like again, he could just throw his money at projects he cares about and let the smart people that he hires take care of stuff. And he could have just coasted, right? He could have partied. He could have spent his time on the beach. He could be paying very high class escorts. He could be dating whatever celebrity he wanted because he has that much money. Like he could be doing any of these things, and he just doesn't, because he wants to be in charge of stuff, and he's got unresolved daddy issues. He pretty publicly has been using ketamine for a while and seems to be using it a lot. And that's the other piece I'm going to talk about here is like, he's not shitty because he's neurodivergent. He's shitty because he's rich. And then he's, you know, done the right-wing grift now where he's gone on Rogan and smoked a joint and wants to deport immigrants, even though he's an immigrant, but then he wants to just bring in like the smart immigrants on their visas. So like, you know, he's just an exploitative capitalist at this point. Again, like not so much based on his values, but based on like his perceived victimization that like, I don't know, he should pay taxes and that like people don't like him because he's an asshole. So he wants to play victim, and the right-wing grift is great for that, right? Like if you've been accused of sexual assault, turn to the right-wing grift. If you're a failed Hollywood maker, right-wing grift, like open arms over there for like the victimhood. And like it's not like they're deeply judgmental, and there's rigid in-group out-group dynamics there. So that open arms is me being a little tongue-in-cheek, but ready to accept people who are gonna toe the party line and spout off their talking points to the tune of 44 billion to buy Twitter, right? Like he bought a social media so that he could block people from talking poorly about him and block his kid who's trans, who highlights what a shitty parent he is. And yeah, that's also probably part of it, is he has a kid who's trans, so that turned him like right-wing grift because they don't want anything to do with him because he's a shit parent. The only kid he seems to spend any time with is the one he carries around as a human shield that Grimes is like desperate to see, and because he's wealthy and the custody battle is playing out in Texas, he just keeps prolonging things. Because Texas is not a good place to likely be a mother trying to get custody when you're up against the richest man in the world. So yeah, he's a shitty parent. He's got like 14 kids by 6 different women, 15 kids by 6. He just had a new one that we just found out about. And again, he like spouts off about white replacement stuff, like replacement theory stuff, which like ties into like the white supremacy in South Africa. And for people who are like not informed on this stuff, it's wild, right? Like the idea that anyone wants to say like he's not racist or Trump's not racist, like, well, they're banning every other group of immigrants who are black or brown from coming to our country, but then they specifically carved out for white South Africans to immigrate to a country very easily. Like, and that's not something that gets headlines. So not a lot of people know about that, but like that's a neo-Nazi talking point for a couple decades now, that like the plight of the white farmer in South Africa has been this made up neo-Nazi stuff to like say, look, our group is persecuted in this country where they've been in charge, even though they shouldn't be, because they've just been an oppressive force. But persecution, right? So it's this nonsense talking point that's like wild to hear coming out of the White House, to be like, oh, this is provably false, and also the only people who talk like this are neo-Nazis. Uh-oh. And Elon has brought up those talking points as well. That's why like the fact that he wanted to leave South Africa doesn't seem to have been for political reasons, which is why I don't really give him that gold star sticker for avoiding military service. It doesn't seem like it was on ethical or moral grounds. It just seems like he didn't want to do it. So yeah, he's a shitty person. And so then, yeah, you know, he had a couple kids with Grimes, and he started doing ketamine. He got really into like gaming, and like we learned he's not good at gaming, and he pressured Grimes to say that he was good at it, and then he's been paying someone to play his video games for him because he's not very good at it. And they started doing ketamine because like, why not? And like, again, he's got all the wealth and resources in the world. So like, you want to do party drugs, you want to have recreational fun, like you can, right? I'm not going to say like that's shitty. If that's how you want to have some recreational fun, I'm not that person who's like, drugs are bad. Somebody who takes an approach that is science-based, that says like there are risks associated with drug use, and if you're going to use drugs, you should use them safely for yourself and for the people who are going to be around you. And regular use of ketamine is not one of those safe things. It is legal. Doctor still has to prescribe it to you. It's not like you can just go to Walmart or CVS, Target, and just get it off the shelf. It still needs to be prescribed. He's assuredly abusing it for how often he seems to be using it. The dark MAGA thing, I think, is just like a cover so he can wear a hat and sunglasses indoors because he's high. Ketamine is sort of a weird, it's considered a psychedelic, but it's sort of it's an anesthetic technically. So the doses that you have to do to get psychedelic effects are fairly high, which is why it's regulated by doctors and prescribed by doctors, because you can abuse it. And who was the Matthew Perry, I think, was the actor from Friends who overdosed on ketamine. Like, again, there's risks associated. It's dangerous. You're not supposed to be doing it all the time. It was a party drug in the 90s, like 90s, early 2000s, I guess, like growing up at the time, like I'd heard about people like going down a K-hole and getting lost. Special K is like the name of the street drug, was in like our Dare stuff. Like, so we knew about it, but like, I don't know that it was readily accessible in the way that it is now. So yeah, for like somebody who doesn't sleep a lot and who might be neurodivergent and not have any friends, he like cries in interviews. And like, I'm not throwing shade at a dude for crying in an interview. Feel your feelings. Go to therapy. Jesus Christ. Go to therapy to work out some of this stuff instead of just like trying to numb it away through substance abuse, right? And like, it's not recreational drug use at this point, and then it's substance abuse. He's talked about like how terrible it is to be lonely, and like Rolling Stone was interviewing him and like, dude, you sound codependent. And he's like, no, the only thing that like has meaning in life is to like have someone in your bed at night. Like, I hate going home and being by myself, which seems to be part of the reason he's such a workaholic, is because like he doesn't have anybody sustainable in his life. And like, what an awful human he must be that he can't even pay for friends. Because like, Dude's got that much money. How can you not have a Tim Pool-esque compound where you have a skate park and you pay for your friends to live there? I'm guessing Pat McAfee also does that, which is a bummer because it seems like for a little bit at least Pat McAfee might be like an okay dude. Um, but yeah, like the fact that he can't even pay for friends and family to be around him is like wild to me. His family's deeply unlikable. Again, like Elon's a piece of shit. His dad is also just awful. And his mom's like, well, if you can't afford kids, just pop them out, but don't take them to the movies. Like, what the fuck? Like that, like rich person, just absolutely out of touch with reality. Like if you grew up poor and somebody's like, you've been to Aspen for skiing, right? You're like, the fuck are you talking about? I have never been skiing and I don't know where Aspen is. I grew up poor. I do know where Aspen is. I don't want to blow up my ACL, so skiing doesn't seem real appealing to me. I did other sports that are bad for my ACL, so I don't need to pick up a new one. But also grew up poor, so no, skiing was never a thing for us. But yeah, like I don't know. His dad talks about like horseback riding and how much land they had. It's like, yeah, dude grew up super wealthy and went to whites only schools. I don't know. He's just a piece of shit. He's arguably just like again a terrible father. He is not involved in his kid's life. He's got a kid who's trans, who he has continues to dead name, or has just said like they're dead to me. He went real like hard turf, like not even turf. He's just like anti-trans. He's done the right wing things. For as much as people like rightfully say Kanye has lost his mind and are shitty about that, and that's another one where they're like, well, he's bipolar. Bipolar people don't turn into neo-Nazis. Just actual Nazis. Literally yesterday, Kanye posted about the Ku Klux Klan robes that he has bought so that he can start wearing them around. So yeah, like Elon's just having a slow breakdown, but because he's in Trump's circle, it's okay because it's just all breakdowns all the time. Breaking down democracy, I don't know. So it'll be interesting. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the American judicial system can do. I'm guessing not a lot. I'm not particularly optimistic of this time in history, but sort of the things that Doge was doing with Elon initially seem to be being held up in court. Elon then goes on X, formerly Twitter, which no one except for neo-Nazis and I think journalists are on anymore, but says that we should deport the judges or we should impeach them, which like, again, he's not even a citizen. So not an elected official. He's just a shitty person who doesn't want to pay his taxes. Yeah, again, like this is where it gets into like the daily political stuff, which is what I don't want to do. Regular ketamine use, again, it's an anesthetic, so it leads to some depersonalization. He could just be like zoning out a lot. As he's firing federal workers, he's got a pretty big fancy gaming rig in his office. So like, he's not spending his time real well. Again, he's somebody who's so wealthy, he's failed up. Like the ideas he's had for Tesla, the Cybertruck is his baby, and it is nothing but like appallingly awful. It shouldn't be allowed on the road. It's way behind scheduling. It's poorly constructed. It's the most recalled vehicle that's out on the road right now. It's way over expensive. Again, like it's just I guess he's good at PR, but like I think again, a lot of that was just based on his reputation. If he had stayed sort of aloof and out of the public eye, I think he'd still be skating by on it. Even with the hard right turn he's taken in his politics, like it's because he's in front of it all the time. He's out in the open, and we see how awful he is to his partners, to his kids, to the people he works with and for. How SpaceX has not become a cheaper alternative. How Teslas are being produced extremely slowly and very expensively. Like how he has run Twitter into the ground, and Twitter was always a cesspool, but like again, he went out of his way to welcome Nazis back onto it. So that's like I talk about this in I don't know, one of my YouTube videos, one of my song reviews, Chumbawamba maybe. But like he's also just a Nazi. And I think he finally recently, in an interview, said that he's not a Nazi. But like several months after doing multiple Sieg Heils in public on camera, that he was excited to. Like you can hear how excited he hits his chest. He's like jazzed about it. And then he talked to the AfD party in Germany because he's pro-authoritarian. He wants to be in charge of the countries so that he won't have to pay taxes. And again, he's just one of those people who like doesn't seem to actually know a lot, and because he's weird, that's sort of translated into like, oh, he must be like operating on a higher level. And it's like, no, he's just weird. His code that he wrote for his early businesses all had to be redone. It was unusable. It's like he gets some of it and is functional, but like not at scale and not in a way that it plays well with other people. So I think he's just neurodivergent and like not that exceptional. Because yeah, it's not like he's a savant. It's that he's neurodivergent. His brain works differently than some other people's, but like he's not so good at things, and he thinks that his brain is better than it is, and so when he doesn't know about something, he's like, I bet I could do this better. And if the Dunning-Kruger effect had not been disproven as more than just a quirk of data, I would say like he's walking Dunning-Kruger. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Dunning-Kruger is this idea that since has been disproven, but it was a hypothesis for a while that people who don't know very much about something vastly overestimate how much they know about it or how much they could know about it. So yeah, I think he's just dumb, and he's neurodivergent, and he's exceptionally wealthy. And we sort of see it with like Trump too, that like, I don't know, you're bankrupting casinos and failing up. Like you just have that much money where you fail up. Trump's a little bit of a different case, obviously, with the right-wing grift. Musk came to that much later. Again, like when Musk and Grimes got together, they were both leftists. So between like, I think brain damage, ketamine use, and not wanting to pay his taxes, there it is. He's just always been a shitty person. He wanted to be well liked, I think, is where the leftist stuff came from. I don't, I just recently watched Interstellar, and the time doesn't match up perfectly, but like I wanted to make a joke that like Interstellar, Elon saw Interstellar and like wanted to be Matt Damon's character. Like he thought like, yeah, getting to Mars at all costs is the point of that movie instead of it being about family. Because that seems to be his thing. Like he wants to be seen as the savior of humanity, and praised and worshipped and loved. And he's just a shitty person who is a bane on all of our existences because he's taking up so many resources without paying taxes. So fuck him. He's a shit person. Yeah, he does Nazi things. He's anti yeah, he's a white supremacist for sure. If he's not an actual Nazi, I think he thinks probably globally enough to not actually be a nationalist about America. I think that's just convenient for him right now. I think he's definitely a white supremacist. Whether that's deeply held belief or just the water he was swimming in growing up, and it's deeply in there, and he's not done the work to get it out. Like again, dude needs to go to therapy. He could afford a lot of therapy. He could go to therapy every single day, right? He's not going to run out of money. So yeah, grown men with daddy issues. That's a Kendrick Lamar reference for those of you who missed it. Yeah, he should go to therapy, and he should pay taxes. He should probably go to jail, just for fraud and all the other things that are going on. I'm a really big fan of like people who are contributing to climate change should be held accountable. And yeah, I don't know. He's just a shit person, and he's always been a shit person. He was a shit person when he was a kid and a teen and early 20s. He's a shit person now. It's unethical to be a billionaire. So yeah, like just on that alone. But I am tired of hearing he's on spectrum. I see people daily, uh, weekly for sure. I don't see people every day, but when I see clients, probably one of them a day is that I'm neurodivergent in some way, shape, or form, and none of them have done a Hail Hitler. None of them are Sieg Heiling on their social media, let alone in front of national news coverage. So, right, like he's not doing that because he's autistic. He's doing that because he's a fan. Um, there's just a lot. He's just a deeply unlikable person. Pick any part of it. His business practices. He's a shitty boss. His romantic partners. He's a shitty partner. His kids. He's a shitty parent. He's anti-democracy, pro-authoritarian, white supremacist, douchebag. Right? Like I don't know. If I had that much money, there wouldn't be hungry kids. And it seemed like at some point he was gonna try and fight climate change, but now he's contributing. So he's a piece of shit. Not because of psychedelics and not because of autism. He's just a shitty person. Sad rich white dude. Go to therapy. Give all your money away and go to therapy. So yeah, I don't have like a nice easy wrap up. Um, I usually like have other things to highlight because I don't care about celebrities. So some of the stuff I had to listen to some other podcasts about Grimes and about Elon. Maybe I'll put those episodes in the show notes. Some of them are outdated. I did the I'm a fan of Behind the Bastards. Um, Knowing that there have been horrible people throughout history has kind of been a grounding thing throughout these times we're living through. But the Elon Musk one is like 4 or 5 years old. It's oddly outdated. It's like opening a time capsule to listen to a podcast about Elon from 5 years ago when he's just starting to like publicly have his meltdown. Similar to Kanye. Kanye's mom died, and that's really I'm not going to start going off about Kanye. Um, Elon doesn't have a good support system around him. That's also true. That like a lot of this would be harder for the public to know about if he had good people around him, but he doesn't. So now we know how shitty he is. Maybe someday he will have to pay taxes and be held accountable for some of the shitty actions. He also, I saw, and this is hearsay, right? Like Grimes posted it, but like how little he pays in child support. Like, yo, like how is it that NFL players who are minorities, right? That answers my own question. How is it that they have to pay so much more in child support than the richest man in the world? Yeah, he's a white guy. Not great, America. Not great, modern civilization. So yeah, that's the episode. How is this supposed to help our mental health? I need sometimes to just ground myself in saying some of these things out loud and knowing that there'll be people who listen and are nodding along. It makes me feel better to know that there are people who see these things for what they are and I'm not losing my mind. So hooray for community. Part of my community is other therapists. I promise. I will have some guests soon. It is a matter of just aligning dates because I have guests lined up. It's just a matter of scheduling. It's not a strong suit of mine, but it's in the works. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for stopping by and checking out the channel. Likes and subscribes are great. If you are listening to the podcast, appreciate that as well. Leaving reviews and or sharing it are super helpful for that. Cool. Peace out, y'all. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Peace.